Beth Schiller, public member, Bodenham.
Roger Burley, public member from Cliff Island.
Thanks, everybody. And Barbara, did I see you online?
Yes, I am Barbara Trafton, public member from Brunswick.
Perfect. This is backwards, Barbara. We usually are here and everybody else is online. It's confusing. So make sure you wave your hand if I miss you, please. And I did just hear from Commissioner Camuso, who got tied up at a meeting, but so she hopes that she'll be here. Just will be running a little bit late. As far as the agenda, we do have a fairly lengthy agenda, but honestly, I don't think there is anything that is going to take a tremendous amount of time. So we should be able to be fairly efficient in getting through today's work. Just as a reminder, you do have, for the public members, you've got per diem forms, just if you could make sure you get them to staff. And as far as any housekeeping facilities down the hall on the left, if you need to take a break or grab a cup of coffee, we've got a little grub behind us as well. So let's move right. Well, before I move along, any updates or concerns around the agenda? Agenda look okay to the board? Seeing heads nod yes, then let's go to item number 2, which is the minutes. Any comments on the minutes that were supplied?
I'm trying to have a tiny comment. I was in attendance at that last meeting.
Let make sure the minutes reflect that you were in attendance.
Thank you.
With that change, anybody have any other comments? Seeing no other comments or any objections to approving with that change? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by consensus. And then moving right along to item number 3, which is the fund balance. So I'll turn to Laura.
Thank you very much. Oh, I tried to make it bigger. I'm not quite sure if I succeeded. So you can see this is the balance as of yesterday. Actually, it says August 31st, but for the interest, at least, that's right up to really right up to the minute. You can see we have an interest. You can see what we have in the bond funds up at the top. Those bond funds, I want you to know, all but 9,188 of them are already encumbered. And then the remaining 9,188 we expect to have out the door before the end of this year, which will be good since 2009 bond funds. And we'll have more of a breakdown in later slides for you to see how much is left per program, because I'm sure this isn't everybody's favorite slide. Yeah. Anybody else questions? Yeah. Active projects, you can see, this is what we have in these allocations include the set asides we've allocated for these projects as well. And also anticipated closings, that may look familiar. They're the same anticipated closes we had in July. But they are really, really, really tipped over to go. Some of them like the day after tomorrow. I mean, they're really, really gonna go this time.
I'll hold you to it.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on that? Not seeing any hands go up. Let's just keep rolling through it.
Okay, and this is a slide everybody's gonna be most interested in. These are the funds you have available to award for projects for CNR. That's in those are 1,691 and 562 are the bare minimum. You have at least that for sure to award. The set asides are already removed from the top, so you don't have to worry about any other calculations. You definitely have that amount of money to award for conservation and recreation funds in a future round.
Okay, any questions? Any questions?
And same deal with the Working Waterfront Access Protection Fund. These are the funds you have available for project awards at the very bottom. And you'll also see on the next slide, working farmland. Oh, and I can assure you that we don't have that many admission requests. You have more than you need than is what has been requested. And the working farmland, here it's a little tighter, 1.415 and $65,000, 1.4 million, a little over. And you'll see it's a much tighter fit with the farmland requested, but they all do fit within this figure.
Okay. Keep going.
And then we have a brief conversation about investment options.
Yeah, so, can you go back to the interest earned? Did you have the interest earned?
Yes, on the
I missed that every time.
first, oh, I'm sorry.
I always like to kind of,
Back to the first, and I actually will do a little breakup for you later on when we talk about next round of, interest in what. But here on the very bottom left, there are $1,102,326 in interest, sorry.
okay, keep that number in mind as we enter this next conversation, part of the conversation.
All right, I'm gonna write this number down so that we.
Forty-four. Oh, you
Yeah.
can remember.
Come on, I can remember. Get all the $326.
Okay, let's go to the investment balance conversation, which is item number 4.
All right. May I give
Yeah.
the, okay, so this was the takeaway from talking to Randy. That it is just as you saw in the short little memo, our funds are currently invested alongside $4 billion other dollars, which gives us a certain amount of clout in this market. So our management costs are relatively low. This is intended to balance risk and provide a sort of good liquidity. And Randy notes that with higher yield investments, we would have to think about volatility and risk. And that the biggest challenge with our funding is that we don't have, it's not like we have a principal amount we can just protect. We have to spend it all. We always have to spend it all. And we don't necessarily have a long lead time to be like, okay, we can't touch this. But if there were, if we'd known, maybe with this last slug where we were just sort of metered out, we could get over 10 million the first time, right? That we knew we had something that would be kept for a period of time, then Randy thought it could make sense to look at other things. And he also was quick to say that we would need to really understand the costs and benefits of any alternatives to make an informed decision about what to do, what next step would be there.
This, has been a conversation, albeit brief conversations at the last several board meetings, around what direction do we want to go in. That 1.4 million is based on, the interest to the principal of our, of the money that we have in hand through the state process, right? There's not a lot, it's not a very high interest rate. So the conversations that we've been having, and some more off to the side, has been, should we be looking at potentially a change in statute that would give us the ability to hold money in another location? And I always use the Maine Community Foundation because that's what I'm familiar with. They hold a lot of money actually for DACF and DMR for the Machias River. It's done incredibly well. They manage it without a lot of risk. There's certainly volatility, right? With any investment, you're going to have up and down, but they can manage for higher risk or lower risk. And I think this is something that would be now. I'd look for Commissioner Beal to think about, do we want to elevate that to the governor for additional conversations? I think based on the board conversation, there's been interest kind of about this concept. So, but before we go any further, I just wanted to see what.
I should have also said that Amy Carlton is here to answer any questions about procurement process.
What's the current interest that we receive? I know it's low, but what is it, like 0.0 or point?
I'd go back to Amy, but it's,
Yep, I will take a look and get you that. It's posted on the treasurer's website as it fluctuates obviously by the month. But
And then I'm definitely in favor of Maine Community Foundation. I know through FS4 Society of Maine, we have a lot, that
Yeah.
works well. It's a good vehicle. So I would definitely be in support of that. And in current statute, we cannot divest from the other 4 million that we have now, I assume. I mean, 4 billion fund that it is in now. So, yeah, I would be in favor of seeing what we could do.
yeah, like a Jim and then Ron.
I know another organization that I've wanted to have very good luck with it, and we tested against other investments, and yeah, been a, it's in the foundation.
Yeah. Roger?
I second Catherine's recommendation and familiar with Maine Community Foundation. They do a great job.
Barbara?
I think this is an important conversation. It seems to me that we have some time here because right now, when our funds are going out the door pretty quickly, it may not be the right time to consider moving out of the cash pool. But if we were fortunate enough to get another $40 million and it was going to sit there for a while before we could ramp up our calls for proposals, we would want to be ready for other options that might maximize our interest while we're sitting on a large chunk of money. The other thing that I read here that I want to be cautious about is moving to any kind of investment strategy that would put a burden on the LMF staff. I don't think we want to do that. So, I think for the time being, I think being in the cash pool, we're doing very well. But it's prudent to explore options, as I said, in the fortunate event that we received a very large allocation again.
Thank you, Barbara.
I was just wondering if I can put Amy on the spot to talk a little bit about the dynamic with having access to cash when we need it and when it's encumbered, and the fact that in the cash pool, we don't have to worry so much about that.
So logistically, the state accounting system and when, for example, if you folks did a round and you awarded $1 million worth of grants out for use, and it takes 2 years to close them, in your mind, those are committed. And for the treasurer's cash pool, that money stays in that account, and we're not really married to the day as your projection of closing happens, and we earn interest during that time. Often, private sector, you have to commit to a certain time frame. And so if you've invested for 6 months, a year, 3 months, whatever that is, someone's going to need to be mindful of when and how to pull those out and have access when you need it, when you close. That is a benefit of the treasurer's cash pool. It's there. And whenever we need to do a draw, if your closing changes by a month and you can get it done sooner, it's not an issue for us. We're being in the treasurer's cash pool. Conversely, it may be depending on who is managing the funding and what kind of parameters are around that commitment. So logistically, it would be probably a little bit more to manage, but it would depend on the sideboards that you had with the third party to be able to manage that. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good background. Any other thoughts on this issue before we move on? I think,
I think that 1.4 million is close to 4% return.
yeah, I do that.
It's in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So I think it's, this is something worth looking at least in my mind, seems like it's interest in the board, and I guess I would look at Commissioner Deal. It obviously falls within your purview, but maybe a conversation with the governor just to see where she is, and if there's any interest, we could then just reach out to a few different groups. Community Foundation always just comes to mind because they've been such a partner on a lot of these issues. That sound okay from the board perspective? Okay. All right, so let's move right along then. Item number 5 is the ACF staff presentations. Oh, no, excuse me. Item number 6 is the LMF policy proposal. So, first one is the Working Farmland Access Protection Program. So,
Yes, and frankly, got to get a slide deck, but because everybody's counting on the slide deck. There you go. Thank you. You want me to?
yeah. I don't know who's up.
Mary, you want to read the ground rules or do you want me to? We didn't. Go ahead. I'll do this. Okay, so ground rules. And Jason did tell me it would be you, Laura, but public attendance is welcome. This is a working meeting. Board members may direct questions to the applicants through the chairman. The board chair will indicate the appropriate time when public comment regarding a proposal may be provided. Reminders, the LMF board is not scoring working farmland proposals. This has been done by a BAFR appointed review panel. The LMF board receives recommendations from the department and our commissioner and selects finalists and makes preliminary funding allocations. And the funding allocations are then to be confirmed by an appraisal. Here we go. Now over to you, Mary.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mariam Talib. I'm the farmland viability and farmland protection specialist with DACF. So this is kind of the top line view for working farmland program this year for 2024. As has been stated, we have about 1.4 million available in funds, and the total that was requested is 1.3 million. Just to start this off, the review committee thought that all 4 of these projects would be a great investment for working farmland access protection program. And one thing that I'll note as we are talking is that there are 4 applications, but 2 of them are from essentially the same business. And the inquiry letter that was submitted for those 2 properties was actually submitted as one inquiry letter. And I would have suggested that they make 1 application, and I just happened to be on vacation. So we have 2 applications for this, but it's essentially the same overall property. If you want to, we can drill in then. And so the first application that we received was for Fortin Farm in Benton and Kennebec County. It's 188 total acres with 119 field acres. It's been closed since about the mid-90s, but it is currently leasing a lot of its land to an adjacent dairy. It's producing feed, particularly hay and silage on that property. And they've pretty good infrastructure on the property, including this lofted hay barn that you can see that's in really great condition. And they're requesting $190,000 for this project. Overall, there are some investments that a new farmer might need to make in order to make this a more viable business for something other than a dairy. And given the total land acreage and the landscape of dairy right now, that would probably be the direction any new farmer would take. But that kind of makes making this property a little bit more affordable even more important so that a next generation of farmers can take this over. We can talk about Tim Flood, the first one first. So Tim Flood Cattle Company, again, submitted 2 different applications. This is the Piper Farm. It's 821 total acres on, I think it's 18 total tax parcels that are spread across 2 towns, Emden and Solon, primarily in Emden in Somerset County. It is part of the total land base for the Tim Flood Cattle Company. They milk at this property and produce feed for their dairy and for the heifer facility in the other farm property that we'll talk about next. And that next property is Williams Farm. And this is a slightly larger land base with 1,600, 1,700 acres across Anson and Madison, primarily in Anson, Somerset County. And this is across 31 tax parcels. This is where the heifer facility is, where they have about 1,300 head of cattle. Between these 2 properties, there is the ability to support a dairy of up to 2,000 actively milked cows, and that is the goal for this business. What is particularly unique about these 2 properties together is that it is such a large land base, and that being able to protect something that covers so much property against fragmentation feels like a really important goal for this program. This particular application is requesting 600. So altogether, that's $900,000 for the 2 projects. The 2 properties spread out across those 4 towns. That covers, it's also riverfront for a great deal of the Kennebec River along this property. I think it totals about 12 miles of river frontage. Then the 4th application is Dunn Farm. This is in Berwick. There's 128 total acres with 67 open field. The map is the wrong map. Sorry. This farm has been was operating as a dairy farm from the late 60s until 2022, when Brett and Denise started to transition. They have about 10 head of beef cattle, but primarily they're grown, which is sold at farm stands and sold locally, and hay for local feed. This property is probably too small to continue to be a successful dairy in the future, but there is a lot of great infrastructure that is adaptable. And it's also the application that without a doubt is under the most development pressure out of all 4 of these. Berwick is very quickly there's farms being lost pretty consistently, and including neighboring farms that have been turned into gas stations and things. So this feels a bit urgent just based on that pressure. And I can, from here, turn it over to Commissioner Beal for her formal recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say that I think the review panel did a really good job of looking at these proposals. And one thing I will say is, some of this land represents land that is suitable for hay and growing food for livestock. And that is something that I think is becoming increasingly important as we see that kind of land be really targeted for development of all types. And we are seeing development pressure ramp up on our farmland quite significantly. So I would recommend that we approve all of these projects.
Good, thank you. So to the board, if you have any questions of any of these projects.
Commissioner Beal, is there soil, or should I tell her? Is there soil of statewide importance on any of these properties?
Yes, there is prime or soil of prime soil or soil of statewide importance on all 4 properties. For Fortin Farm, it's about 121 acres of the 188. For the Piper Farm application, it's about 440 acres of the 821. For the Williams Farm property, it's about 1,000 of the 1,700 or so. And for the Dunn Farm, it's 59 acres of the 128. So a solid portion of all of these properties have high quality soil. It was noted also by a soil scientist on the review panel that the soils that are not deemed prime or statewide importance were also pretty high quality in all 4 of these properties.
There is a draft motion. Would anybody like to? Oh, Barbara, you got it. Snuck in under the wire.
I was just wondering if you could comment on the viability of the dairy farm, because that's a huge dairy farm, and we're all aware that dairy farms seem to be under particular pressure. And I just wonder what are the elements of success that this dairy farm seems to possess?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think a huge part of why this dairy farm is successful is that very large land base. That it's also allowed them to kind of diversify those enterprises and be pulling in some of their income from the heifer facility. And I think that will continue to be productive and helpful in just having the ability to grow this business. Dairies are all under pressure, but there is a bit of an economy of scale in regards to dairy at this point. And the other thing I will note is in the event that this were to stop being a dairy and there were other sort of agricultural interests at stake for this land. There is the ability to divide the land for multiple types for multiple farms, just because there is such a large land base. If a vegetable farmer were to want to purchase a smaller portion of it that's more affordable, and that was discussed in the application.
Thank you.
I really appreciate hearing about the ability to be, I guess, flexible and fluid within the use of these properties. And with that, I'm wondering if there's a homestead area that's set aside or multiple, given future thought for farmer housing, knowing that that's one of the biggest pressures on transitioning farms.
Yeah, there is a farmhouse on the Piper property. There is not a farmhouse on the Williams property, but there is quite a lot of insulated building. And so the thought is that many of the structures that are on that property are relatively convertible, actually, to housing.
Before we go to a motion with the board, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these projects? Seeing any, then back to the board. Roger.
Move that we select Horton Farm, the Tim Flood Piper Farm, the Tim Flood Williams Farm, and Dunn Farm as finalists with a total preliminary allocation of $1,340,000.
Second. Second by Catherine. Any discussion on the motion? Give me the record then. This select the Horton, Tim Flood Piper, Williams, and the Dunn Farms as finalists with a total preliminary allocation of $1,340,000. Is there any objection to the motion? Being no objection in the room or online, then the motion passes. Great. Is this the first time we've used the news process?
No.
This is the second
Yeah,
time.
this is the second.
Second time, yeah.
Why is there no subject to standard conditions?
I don't know why either, but we'll come back to you for the final
Oh,
award and
fine,
you'll
yeah,
absolutely do that. I'm not sure that we do normally a preliminary award.
I think the answer is the LMF staff forgot to write it into.
Oh, you're sad. Thank you, Jason.
The fact that they
I'll
did
own that
that,
one.
we'll just, let's make sure the record is clear that the board understands that this is subject to the standard conditions.
Good.
Great. We'll talk after the meeting.
Hi, Jason.
Okay, great. Then let's move right along to work and water fund. And Deidre here.
I'm Deirdre Gilbert with the Department of Marine Resources. I'm just going to give a little bit of context before Melissa's actually going to present the specific projects. But just as a reminder, at your meeting in January of this year, we asked you to make a few minor changes to the Working Waterfront workbook because we anticipated we'd be getting a lot of projects following the storms in early January. So we wanted to be prepared to kind of consider those projects accordingly. That is not what ended up happening in reality. And I would say one of the things I just wanted to provide again as context is that you may be aware during this past legislative session, the governor proposed and the legislature approved $25 million for a Working Waterfront Resilience Grant program. So we were running that concurrently with this application period. So we opened this program the day after your board meeting. It closed for letters of interest in early March, right after the Fishermen's Forum. We got 8 letters of interest, and we encouraged all those folks to apply. We visited all of the properties, and at the end of the day, we only got, out of the 8 letters, we only got 3 actual applications from Clark's Cove, Stonington Co-op, and Hancock Marine. So at least it was a good geographic spread. I know at least two of those two of the letters also applied to the resilience grants and were awarded the resilience grants. So I think that really did inform people's decision-making. I think in the long term, we're hoping that the folks who got the resilience grants and used those grants to improve their property will then later come back to this program. And it's kind of works out to both of our advantage. That will increase the size of their award, but it will also mean that the properties that we're putting covenants on have had those improvements made, which is kind of a win-win. So that's kind of all the background we wanted to provide. I'm gonna have Melissa actually speak to the three proposals. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry.
So what did you attribute the apparent lack of interest? Is it the resilience money that really did it, or?
Yeah, well, so I think we would have had 5 applications were it not for the resilience money. I think, this program started in 2006. We've got covenants on 30 properties now. I think we are seeing kind of, I don't know what to call it. We talk a lot internally about how this is a pretty significant decision for a working waterfront property owner to make. Melissa has a lot of conversations with folks to make sure they understand the ramifications of the covenants. I think there's just a tension between folks needing money to invest in their properties, but not wanting to compromise the long-term value of the property. So I think the pool that we got right now is not atypical for annually how much interest there might be in actually encumbering a property like this in this manner, and a little bit reduced because of the other grant program.
So the prerequisites for each one were somewhat different, and
For the resilience grants, yeah, those were pretty minimal. What we were requiring with that was a 50% match. So we were willing to help rebuild properties that were damaged in this winter storms in a manner that made them more resilient to future events. And they had to support 10 or more commercial, like 10 or more license holders from either the commercial fishing industry or the aquaculture industry. And then basically upon the provision of the invoices, the state will reimburse them 50% of their costs. So it was.
We had how many we funded?
We got 80 applications and we funded 68 of those projects.
And a lot of those people, if that money didn't come through, we would have seen a big push for this money. Listen.
So before I go on, I just wanted to mention that we follow a similar process to the farmland process. So we get our applications, we have an external review panel who reads and scores the applications based on the criteria in the workbook, and then they make recommendations to the commissioner, Commissioner Kelleher, and that's what we're reporting today. I also just wanted to mention that 2 of the properties, the Hancock Marine property and the Clark's Cove property, only want to put covenants on part of their property. Kind of a new thing, and we're not entirely sure how to handle that, because really we can't know until we do an appraisal what the portion of the property will be worth. We have discussed that many times with the applicants, but I will say that the estimate request there is probably a bit high. But we have to do the appraisals to know for sure. Next slide. The first one I was going to talk about is the Hancock Marine property. It's a boatyard in Hancock, and it's owned by a gentleman who lives right on the point at the tip of the property. And he's hoping to only encumber that section in the dotted line. So really the parking, boat storage, wharf, and boat ramp. And he has developed a relationship with the Frenchman's Bay Conservancy, and they've been working with him for several years to think about ways of protecting this property and keeping it as a working waterfront. It's one of the last working access places in Hancock, and there's really no other nearby access options if this goes away. The property has a boat launch and boat storage. It used to have fuel and a wharf and some other working waterfront stuff, but the owner doesn't have a lot of capacity, and so the property is probably not being used as much as it could be. He's hoping to encumber 1.8 acres, and our estimate for that covenant is $575,500. And they have about 730 feet of frontage in that dotted line section. Next slide. Yeah.
The rear portion of that property,
Yes.
what's its current use? And, is there covenants or zoning that it continues to it being supportive of the property as opposed to some sort of recreational or business, other business?
So as of now, I don't think there's any kind of zoning or restriction on the property. At one point, the owner did have it evaluated and it has septic capacity, so houses could be built. I think the owner is trying to think about how to maximize his investment. He wants to have the ability to still sell the inland portion. We're aware that like road access is going to be essential so the property can keep working. Do you have anything to add, Deirdre?
No, I think he is trying to decide what to do with the remainder of the property. And we are hoping to protect the working waterfront section while he goes through that process.
Despite the fact that the portion they want to encumber might enhance the value of. That's the IRS person in this.
Okay.
There's a question from Barbara too.
Oh, Barbara.
Thank you, Commissioner. I noted that this property does have a seawall, and I wondered if, and some of the funds are intended to, I guess, improve that seawall. I wondered if you could comment on damage that was received in the last couple of storms and just how resilient this property would be in the future.
Yeah, so I don't think this property was damaged that badly in the storms this winter. It has not, the maintenance has probably not been kept up a lot over the last couple of years, so the seawall's not in very good shape right now. It's the next, actually, if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see a picture on the left. Right. So the property itself is pretty low lying, although other than the house, there's not a lot of infrastructure at risk on the waterfront. So it's definitely vulnerable to sea level rise.
Is that the house out there?
Yeah, that's actually a shed and the house is kind of right behind it. You have anything to add to that, Deirdre?
I would say the folks who are using this property, they're not using the seawall. They're just literally using it to access their vessel. And there's some, it's mostly lobster boats. There's also a Menhaden operation out of that facility. So although it does not have like great utility at this time, like the utility that people need is being provided.
Does that answer your question? Are you all set?
Sort of. I guess I'm not totally clear why this property didn't experience the same level of damage that other properties did. Is it located in a more protected area so that it's just a matter of the rising seas as opposed to surging waves?
Yeah, so if you look at this map, Barbara, the one on the left, it shows that this is within a fairly protected area from the wind. They certainly would have had the tide and the surge, but the wind associated with those storms, which was southeasterly, would have been protected a little bit by the land on the left, plus the two islands at the mouth. So I think from a wind perspective, they were protected somewhat. And I think the other thing is they didn't have infrastructure there, wharfs or piers. If they were wharfs or piers, they may have seen, because of the tidal surge, they may have seen some additional damage.
And I did see, when I was looking through some materials that Marine Patrol put together, Marine Patrol visited this site after the storms just to see what the damage was. So they took some pictures, but to your point, there wasn't a lot there to begin with, so it was hard to see.
Yeah. And I think one of the other comments you made, Barbara, and I think it's good for the board just to hear this again, since we don't do working waterfront projects all the time. We're not asking for a guarantee on how they spend the money. Because we are purchasing a covenant. They can use this money to go to Disney World. They can use it for whatever they want, right? Our sole goal here is to protect access for commercial fishing. And this is one of the last areas in this area that has that dedicated access. So this is, from that standpoint, this is a really important project. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is there a threat of not having access for vehicles if that second parcel that's not being encumbered becomes private house and they cut off road access through that? I'm assuming that little loop driveway, is there any way to get an easement to protect access?
That's a great question. If you have, has there been conversations about a guaranteed access with the road?
I think so, and we've at least mentioned it.
I was gonna say, internally, we have talked about the fact that that would be a prerequisite of doing this project.
Due diligence, so we need to make sure within the due diligence. So, yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Any other questions on this one? Why don't we move right along?
Alrighty, so our next one is the Stonington Co-op property number 2. And so this one is in downtown Stonington. In the 2019 round, their other property, which is a little bit farther east, was encumbered through that round. So this property is 3/4 of an acre and it has quite a bit packed into not a lot of space. There's parking, storage, and float access. The bottom left portion of the property where you can kind of see a shed, that part was damaged pretty badly this winter. And so they essentially patched it up to get it working for the summer, but they're planning to tear it down and rebuild that bottom portion about 3 feet higher this winter. So they're really thinking about how to keep this property resilient and working. And their request was $437,500. Next slide.
And just quickly on that one, that property did apply to the Working Downtown Resilience Grant Program and got an allocation. And based on our last conversation, their plan is to do that work this winter, get the property fully improved, then they'll have the appraisal done for this program.
Is that the shed you're talking about or not?
Yeah, they're planning to move it and raise it, put it somewhere else. So that's the portion that will be rebuilt. And you can see the bulkheads that they've already poured the concrete higher. They just have to build the rest of the structure higher this winter.
Here to what was the wall here to the right of the shed, as you're looking at the photograph, was pretty much all destroyed. Luckily, they were able to pull tanks and all of the equipment back off out of the way during the storms. And the Stonington Co-op has around 100 members. It's the biggest co-op in the state. They handle more product than anybody from a co-op perspective. So they got so big, they had to purchase a second property. So that's why they were able to basically survive, because they were able to move all of their work over to the other property while they were doing this. And they fronted all of the money in order to be able to start this project. So this is phase 1. You see what you see here is phase 1, and phase 2 would be done this winter. I believe they have all permits in hand too, so they
do.
Yeah. Okay.
Next slide. So last but not least, we have the Clarks Cove Enterprises property. It's on Clarks Cove and the Damariscotta River. It's about halfway between Damariscotta and the tip of South Bristol. This is another one where the owner wants to put the covenants just on part of the property and mostly the waterfront and parking area close to the shed. I think the exact boundary is not set in stone, but that's roughly what he's thinking. It's a bit under half of an acre. The property as a whole is 7 acres. There's a house at the end, and then mostly just a lot of field. This property provides parking, a drive-on wharf, and then access to nearby aquaculture leases and moorings. There's several aquaculture farms, I think 7 or 8, that use this property, as well as 1 or 2 lobstermen. There's a tiny bit of mixed use as the owner does also keep his sailboat and access it from the wharf, but it's mostly used for commercial purposes. And their request was again 437,500, but we're having them estimate based on the value of the whole property, not that little piece. So it's probably going to be a lower number. And next slide. I think that's, you can see, you can't actually see the parking lot very well. There's probably parking for maybe 5 or 6 cars. You can drive onto the wharf. It was rebuilt, I think, in the 90s, and they did a lot of maintenance a few years ago, so it's in pretty good shape. If they're to get this award, the money for future maintenance and resilience needs. I think that's all I had for this one. Do you have anything to add, Deirdre?
Great. Back to the board. Any additional questions?
Same thing, access for
Yeah.
this to
Yeah.
would be the same thing. due
Yeah.
diligence.
Yes, and we did have that conversation with the landowner.
Anything on IRS?
Not seeing any immediate hand at the board level. Let's go to the public. Is there any questions or comments from the public on these polls? Seeing any in the room or online? Back to, oh, we do have one online. EW online.
Hi, everyone. This is Erin Witham with Frenchman Bay Conservancy, and we've been working with the landowner of Hancock Marine. And I just thought I could address, if appropriate, I could address a couple of the questions that folks had, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you'd like to address the access question, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the landowner is very committed to continued access and is looking for solutions to protect the working waterfront. So absolutely understands that the road would be part of the access. At times, he has also discussed building an additional road down through the wooded area of the property as another option for increasing access. So I definitely think those are part of the possibilities. But I just want to state again, yeah, the landowner really sees this as a priority. I don't know how interested he is in potentially, selling off that wooded area. I think he would like to see that protected in some way as well, which is part of why Frenchman Bay Conservancy is interested in continuing to work with him and see what other kinds of protection might happen on this property.
Great. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
Sort of answered my question in terms of the Frenchman Bay concerned about what's going to go on, but I guess it's another question in terms of the enhancement to the balance of the property for some sort of commercial or residential use that looks even more of a possibility here than on the earlier one that had questions over. But I guess in response, asking the gal to explain just how detailed that concern is for the balance of the property, and is there any intent to, take it another step on that unencumbered portion?
I think there is interest in it. As Melissa said, we're kind of sort of taking a more conservative approach, assuming encumbrance on part of the property, but depending on sort of how sort of the next steps of this project go, I think it could make sense potentially to encumber the full property or a larger portion of the property, if that's what's needed to sort of really ensure that there's good access and that it's not in conflict with other uses.
Right. Any other questions of the board for any of the proposals? Seeing none, we advance to the you guys gonna go through the okay.
This is also missing standard conditions because one LMF said thinking on another. So, yes, this is for you,
Yeah. The committee did, recommend these, to me, based on the, interest in protecting commercial fishing access. And after those conversations and looking at these, I certainly support these projects and would recommend that the LMF also support these projects. After obviously we hear about some of the standard conditions and issues associated with access. So,
Did we have a member on that board? Any of our members?
Yeah.
Serving on the selection?
Yeah.
Okay.
godfather of.
Make a motion.
Yeah, please.
I move that we select Clark's Cove, Hancock Marine, and Stonington Co-op as finalists with a total preliminary allocation of $1,450,000, subject to standard conditions.
Motion by Roger, seconded by Judy. Any questions from the board? Seeing any, I'll read back into the record. The motion is to select Clark's Cove and Hancock Marine and Stonington Co-op 2 as the finalists with preliminary allocations of 1.45 million in allocation, subject to standard conditions. Is there any opposition to that motion? Seeing no opposition in the room or online, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Let's move right along then into the next phase, which are projects to be acted upon. You've got a bunch of them.
Muddy River Preserve. I'm David Hediger, for those that don't know who I am. Muddy River Preserve, Topsom. They're looking to preserve 2 parcels of land here, separated by an old discontinued street. The southern parcel is about 24 acres, the northern parcel is about 81 acres. You'll see in this map that it does abut Muddy River. Is over 4,000 feet of shoreline along there, as well as a stream running through the property there. Multiple uplands, streams, forest types there, as well as tidal influenced areas associated with the river. The other attraction to this is that the northern parcel is already in a protected part of IFW's wildlife management area and a portion of Quebec's estuary focus area of statewide ecological significance. So the Appraisal Oversight Committee met on the 27th to discuss this because there are some federal funds involved with this from the U.S. Forest Service. They had to get a Yellow Book appraisal and review, and that was completed because there's 2 parcels. There were 2 appraisals and 2 reviews. 4 acres at 127,000 and the 81 acres at 230,000, and the committee accepted both of those appraisals. So yeah, you have a draft motion for the board's consideration.
Okay. Roger?
I move that we confirm the allocation of $166,000 in LMF Conservation and Recreation funding to support the acquisition. Oh, subject to standard conditions.
You did motion number 2. I'll start with motion number 2. Or 1, you're getting ahead of us, Roger. But before you do, actually, who is the chair, who's the current chair of AOC? Barbara? It would be.
Well, we're co-chairs. We're co-chairs. But I'll make the draft motion to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $357,000 for the 2 parcels.
And as a committee motion, does not need a second. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objections to the motion? Draft motion number 1. Seeing none, no objections, the motion passes without objection. Roger.
Oh, a redo. I move that we confirm the allocation of $166,000 and LMF conservation recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Second by Judy. I think I saw her hand go
Oh,
up.
I didn't think we had to say.
You didn't, this is not a committee motion.
Okay, so second, yes.
Yeah.
We only have to do it, fund them once though, or not twice. So.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions on the motion? Seeing no questions, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, motion passes to confirm the allocation of $166,000 in LMF conservation recreational funding. Great, excellent, thank you. Let's move right along. Get a big sugar rush.
The next one you have is Watson Woods, Cumberland County. Next slide. 79 acres. It's going to be by the Chevegan Cumberland Land Trust, forest riparian habitat, hiking trails. It's largely surrounded by conservation area. You can see on this map all of the shaded green areas are already areas that are in conservation. This property is abutted, maybe half of it is already abutted by other areas of conservation by the land trust. And Oversight Committee approved this on the 27th, and it's similar again. This one has Forest Service funds involved, so it was the Yellow Book appraisal and review was necessary. Those are both completed with a value of $330,000. The committee accepted that appraised value. Motion for your consideration.
Okay, Barbara or Catherine?
I move that we approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $660,000.
Great, thank you. This committee motion does not need a second. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections in the room or online, the motion passes to approve the recommendation of the Appraisal Oversight Committee. Excellent. Move right along.
So as with the last project, we did advertise this in the Portland Press, Kennebec Journal. We didn't receive any comments. You have a second motion for consideration.
I'll move to confirm the allocation of $330,000 in LMF conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Motion by Judy, seconded by Roger. Are there any questions on the motion? Questions? Is there any objections to the motion? There's no objections in the room or online. The motion passes to confirm the allocation of $330,000 in CNO. Excellent.
I should just quickly note there was Penny is here from the land trust, if there were any questions for her, as well as Margaret for the last proposal as well.
Excellent. Well, we don't need you guys.
Thanks for being here.
No, I just want to say thank you all very much for supporting this project, and it was great to walk out there with David last week.
Okay. Moving right along.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Next up is a Branch Lake expansion that's in Hancock County. It's almost 280 acre fee acquisition via bargain sale by the city of Ellsworth. It's in the watershed for Branch Lake, and that's a public water source, and it's also quite a recreational asset for that area. As you can see from the map, this will expand on their existing public forests, which I believe received LMF funding. And it's going to connect to other nearby conservation lands, some of them owned by the city, some owned by the state, some held in conservation easement by our friends at Frenchman's Bay Conservancy and Forest Society of Maine. In total, creating a nearly 1,400 acre block of undeveloped land on that east side of the lake. The primary access, you can see the little symbol on the map, and then that's the map of the existing public forest. At this point, access would be off the existing pedestrian trail network. They'd expand from that. Although they do have the right to build a second access road from Branch Lake Road, which is sort of to the northeast, Sorry, the font's not as giant as I hoped, but is labeled on that map. This is about 20 to 30 minutes from Bangor, depending on traffic. Next slide, please. The AOC met on the 27th of August to discuss this appraisal. Again, this is a bargain sale, but the appraised value was $216,000. I did just want to note, the appraisal had an effective valuation date of July 13th last year. LMF workbook, I know you all have this memorized, how the appraisal standards work, but typically it's within 12 months of the report date from when the AOC approves it is the standard we're looking for. In this case, we had asked the applicant to delay submitting their appraisal and their review letter to LMF because they're applying for federal funding, and we wanted to make sure that it would be approved by that program first. And also this is a bargain sale, so it's actually quite a bit, the sale price is quite a bit below where the appraised value came in. So the final award that's being recommended is based on that bargain sale. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Yes, Matt.
This is kind of a generic one. 50% of the bargain sale price. If we wanted to award 50% of the appraised value, could we do that?
Can we?
Oh, yes, you can, you use it, if you have to think about whether that makes sense, right? Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think in this, I'm not certain, I'd have to speak more with the city. Seem pretty certain they're going to get LWCF funding. And so for them, it's really more funding the due diligence that's going to slow the project down versus I think the purchase price, because the seller is obviously really interested. It's Haynes. They're really interested in this land coming to the city, for them to be selling it at this price, I think, and they're about to sign a PNS with them.
Thank you.
All right, we have a draft motion.
To approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $216,000 for the project parcel.
Great, that's committee motion. Does not need a second. Your comments on the motion? Seeing none, are there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections in the room or online, the motion passes. Perfect, let's move right along.
Thank you. Public notice went out to the appropriate places. We received no comments. And so we have a second motion for you if you would entertain it.
Back to the board. Roger?
I move we confirm the allocations of $92,500 in conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
By Roger, seconded by Judy. Any questions? No questions. Any opposition to the motion? Being no opposition online or in the room, the motion to confirm the allocation of $92,500 in CNR funds, subject to standard conditions, is approved. Great, thank you. Move right along.
Okay, next up, excuse me. Next up, we have,
Get anything in this presentation?
we'll find out, won't we? Porter Hills Phase 2 project, the Moody Road parcel. This parcel, the two red outlines there are both the same parcel that known as the Moody Road parcel. Combined are 98.6 acres that were pre-acquired by the Francis Small Heritage Trust in April. This is the first of two parcels that's going to come through for this project. The second parcel is going to come through separately. This one, you can see, connects the Porter Heath, I've been told it's pronounced, to the north, to the Phase 1 lands to the south, and expands the habitat and recreation area that is part of this larger project. They have, as I said, pre-acquired this and want to get their LMF money by the end of this year so they can stop paying interest. And we'll move forward with the second parcel when that comes through next year. So the AOC met on August 27th to discuss this appraisal and accepted the appraised value of $180,000. We have the first draft motion.
To approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $180,000 for the project parcel.
Any motion, does it need a second? Any questions or comments on the appraisal or the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection? Seeing no objections, the motion passes. Right along.
Public notice was advertised in the Kennebec Journal and Press Herald on August 31st. No comments were received. And there's a second draft motion. I don't think I forgot anything on it.
Okay, Roger.
Move we confirm the allocation of $89,000 in CNR funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
We have a second? Seconded by Jim. Any questions on the motion? Questions or any objections? Objections either in the room or online. The motion to confirm the allocation of 89,000 in CNR funds, subject to standard conditions passes. Excellent. Right along.
All right, Eastern Trail and Cottontails. Dr. Seuss here. So this involves two parcels. The town of Wells is looking to acquire 31 acres. That's the red parcel that you see kind of on the left side there. It'll have frontage on the Eastern Trail. That's kind of that orange yellow line that you see go through there. That's an abandoned rail line and currently a gas utility line. This will be managed for New England Cottontail, which is already done, and two abutting conservation properties. Those are, I moved the mouse, these lots down here are currently managed for Cottontails. So given the proximity, they're gonna continue that habitat protection there. And as match, they're looking to protect, as match will be the 130 acres of town-owned land. They already own this Getchell parcel. That too will have access to the Eastern Trail there. Next slide. That's what we're looking at. So again, appraisal oversight committee, they were busy on the 27th. We have 3 parcels involved here. Actually, to highlight the Getchell parcel up here, there's 2 parcels. It's a small one here too, referred to as Bill's Lane, but it's all part of Getchell's parcel. So 3 appraisals, 3 reviews. The committee accepted all the appraised values. Motion for you folks.
To approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $1,022,000 for the 3 parcels.
Any motion does not need a second. Is there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objections to the motion? No objections are online or in the room. The motion passes.
And we did notice in the Portland Press in Kennebec, no comments were received. I will note Owen Grumbling is here in attendance for the Wells Conservation Commission.
Are they only grumbling?
Grumbling, Owen.
I actually thought he said he was grumbling too, but
I'm grumbling at Mr. Grumbling is here.
So grumbling as an environmentalist, that's, except for today.
Well, after that, Judy, do you want to make a motion? Bring yourself out.
I will move to confirm the allocation of $350,000 in LMF conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
By Judy, second by Roger. Any questions on the motion? No questions or any objections? Seeing no objections online or in the room, the motion passes to confirm the allocation of $350,000 in LMF DNR funds, subject to standard conditions. Excellent, congratulations.
Thank you for your support and more thank you for your work here overall for the whole state.
Thank you. Next project.
All right, next up is a request by Blue Hill Heritage Trust to allow them to grant a right-of-way across the Walmatogus Mountain property. There is an existing cell tower on the mountain that is not part of the LMF project. And they would like to grant a right-of-way on the green line on that map to replace the right-of-way on the red line of that map. That red line is not a permanent right-of-way, it's access on, but it is the access under the existing lease to the cell tower. So they're changing that to a right-of-way over the green line, which is more direct. It is in better repair. There is less erosion. The net impact is less, net result is less impact on the conserved area. So BPL is the designated state agency. They support this change, this new right-of-way. But granting any interest in land, of course, requires the approval of the LMF board. So that is why we are asking for your approval. And if you give your approval, then LMF staff will work with council to review and approve the right-of-way document itself, and also to determine whether we need to amend the project agreement in any way to reflect that.
Jason, did you say the red line was the current deeded right away?
It is not needed. It is a access provision that is part of the lease.
So, what happens, should we approve the new right of way? What happens to that red trail?
The legal access over the red line will be extinguished. It will be the green line going forward.
Just let the trail get maintained, or?
I mean, it's a washed up gravel road. It's not going anywhere.
Any other questions from the board? Barbara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, would this right of way also run concurrent with the lease? And would it be extinguished if the lease is not renewed?
My understanding, and I see that Hans is here from Blue Hill Heritage Trust, so I'll ask him to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. My understanding is that they're going from a lease to a permanent easement to maintain allowing the cell tower to be on the top of the mountain there. So the right of way itself will also be permanent, and I don't know if there will be any provisions in that. We haven't seen a draft yet as far as provision for extinguishing it.
Mm-hmm.
No longer be tied to a term of years.
But it seems to me if it's specific to this cellular company and the location of the cell tower, if the lease no longer exists, it would be inappropriate to maintain a right of way to that entity to access to the top of the property.
I will now ask Hans if they have had any conversations about termination provisions or what might happen next.
Okay.
Yeah, hi folks. So this is a permanent easement agreement with the tower, which will run as long as there is a communications tower in that location. And currently it's owned by American Tower, but it would go to any new owner. We have a long-term lease with them. They asked for a permanent easement agreement. It is in our interest to work with them on that. So the access into the tower site will exist as long as the tower site exists. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I just feel strongly that, the right of way should only exist as long as a cell tower is sited there. And to have any entity owning a right of way there in perpetuity would be inappropriate.
I only heard the affirmative stated that the right of way will go with the existence of the tower. I did not hear the negative that Barbara's raising established that if that lease goes away, the right of way goes away. That was not said explicitly.
Right, and I honestly, I don't have I can't read through the document right now. I don't know if that language is in there. Is Rick Cheney there with you this morning? He's the attorney who's working with us on this.
Don't
I know
see.
he was supposed to be there for somebody, for another organization. I mean, I mean, we can certainly write that language into the document if it doesn't exist in the document right now. This is, yeah, that would not be a problem. They don't, if there's no tower, they don't need to access the site.
I guess I feel that's appropriate and would ask the staff to work with you to follow up on that, because having a right of way existing without the explicit purpose that it was granted for seems to me inappropriate.
Jim?
Will there be any further action regarding any impact to the original appraisal that occurred and was submitted to us because of the lack of this right of way? Has that been contemplated at all?
It has not.
Jason, did you have a draft motion? Because it seems to me if you do, we may need to modify.
We do, and yes, I think a modification would be good. So we have that on the record.
Could I clarify too, for the appraisal question that, for Jim,
Yep.
that the cell tower was excluded from what we funded? And the right of way, I know we talked about it internally, was being swapped, we understood, for the existing, so we felt like, and it was shorter, it seemed like, you know, like a non-thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, non-issues, or not non-thing.
So I think from a board's perspective, we could do, I don't know what the timing is for the land trust, but we could do this in two different ways. We could wait for them to make sure this language can be included in this and then take this up at a future meeting. Or we could authorize the grant of right of way across the property as proposed, pending the review of the right of way and the language that has been suggested by Barbara. That's a long word. That's not my exact wording of the motion, but you get where I'm going.
I think I understand the board's intent. I'm comfortable kind of taking that in, to council and to Hans from here as part of the staff review and approval of the right-of-way document, that there be some sort of sunsetting provisions if the cell tower is no longer.
So authorize the grant of right-of-way across the property as proposed, pending review.
I think it's not just review, but it's inclusion of additional language.
Review and inclusion of the, I guess it would be a sunset provision of the language of the easement.
Would you want
including language to terminate the easement in the event that a cell tower is no longer the purpose of the easement? And Jason, could you share the language with us just so we can take a look at it before?
Yeah, I think that will be the process that that portion of the easement will come back before the board before it is granted.
Jason, could you, so we have language up. Let's table this just for a minute. But Jason, let's continue on with the agenda. Let Jason write some language.
I'm trying to think if I can do that while I'm sharing the slides on the screen.
Let David write.
Well, I think the goal is, do you want me to just write it and read it to you, or do you want to see it up on a slide?
Could read it.
Okay, yeah, it's gonna pen and pencil would be great.
multitask.
Right. So what I want to do then is just bring up the work that we have before us, why he's frantically over there writing.
Yes.
We only have a few items left. And that way, we can get out of here and get to lunch on time, and some of us don't miss cabinet.
It'll be quick too.
Yeah.
Short.
So let's move on to item number 8, public access discussion follow-up. So
Yes.
Laura.
All right, a lot of slides. Next slide, I'm sorry. Thank you. Beautiful picture, couldn't resist, had to leave it up. Keep going. Yes. The context, this is where you'll note, Sharp Eyes noted that L3 was missing from your packet. L3 was that map you see right there on the left. And the point of that map was to demonstrate where the northern woods are in the blue circle along the top. And to show, and I'm going to say this correctly, correct me, Erica, if I'm wrong, the KI Joe Mary road system. I keep wanting to say Kai Joe Mary, I just can't help myself. So, and that's that little yellow outline in the middle there, that shows you where those road systems are and where the northern woods are. And then, of course, there's the statute. That context was, we thought, important. Okay, next slide. This is going to be tedious, I'm afraid. So these are the proposed revisions we got from over and above what the last draft you had with things to MAC. You can see they are some clarifying. This was to clarify, the list of things that they needed to be able to do and show. And then I don't know if people have, should I pause on the slide? People go, I don't like that word or.
Nobody sees anything that's jumping out at them.
Okay.
It should be North Main Woods.
North Main Woods, sorry. Oh, North Main Woods, okay.
The DSA, has our staff had a chance to review these changes?
No, they would have only just seen them. We're not gonna vote on this today. I should have said too, we're not voting on this today. We're gonna bring all this back for a vote when we do the workbook. But we'll make sure that DSAs have a chance to see these proposed draft changes.
Again, we're not voting on this today, but is everybody satisfied with the language and draft as it exists? Okay.
There's no changes from when you emailed this version.
No,
That's
it's
right.
the same one you got emailed. This is the same one. I just wanted to learn from last time that you guys actually want to see the red lines on the
Yes.
screen. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Good. Good.
Okay.
And next slide.
Yep, next
We
slide.
got 4 of these. Okay. And this is around the timing, how they're supposed to come forward as soon as they know they need to let the board know. At the earliest opportunity. So it was cleaning up the sentence structure, making it less awkward. Decent pause. Next slide. Oh, yes. Substituting pursuing for exhausting. The gist of this. And really the whole point, the biggest aspect of the proposed policy revisions are that the board holds the discretion at all times. We don't have to try to lock it down. It has to be X, Y, or Z. You guys are going to be deciding. Okay, next slide. And the very last item. Yeah, just making it less awkward. I think that's it. Next slide. Yes, and then that's just, our plan is to bring this back to you all as part of the vote for the round 13 workbook.
Which will be.
That is the next conversation we're having. Very funny you should ask. So,
Jim.
So is there any feelings out there in the public or stakeholders or whatever about what we're attempting?
So, I mean, what came to you last time in July was the product of work with stakeholders, absolutely. And these are some revisions that came on top of that. And when I say minor, I don't mean importance wise, but like there are really not a lot of changes to what was developed in that process. Yeah.
Good. Okay, why don't we just move on to the next item, which will.
Go on, keep going, all right.
Let me break in. You wanted to circle back to the wall of Atoga's right of way now. Have some language for you
No,
to.
let's finish you're gonna have a staff recommendation still on public access, right?
Public access, this is just,
That's the last
that,
main agenda item set.
here we are.
Okay, then let's untable the table motion.
All right, so the revised motion language for your that I've just now drafted for your consideration would be to authorize the grant of a right-of-way across the wall of Atoga's mountain property as proposed, subject to the inclusion of a sunset provision in the right-of-way to be reviewed by the LMF board, and providing for the right-of-way to be extinguished if a communications tower is no longer operated on the property.
Can I jump in for a second, Jason?
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm fine with that. Go ahead.
There is a section of the current easement document which deals with the conditions in which the easement property will be left if there is no, if the tower has to be taken down if they are not using it as a tower. And so I think it's easily addable here in this section that, any right of access will go away with the termination of the easement.
Okay. But I think this language within the motion will allow us to take one last look. So we're giving preliminary approval of the change in the easement, with the understanding that the board will have, once we see the language, it will become final. And I think we can do a simple, because we're going to take the vote now. It's a simple email review. We can do it outside of a meeting, just to say, does anybody have any issues? If they do, we might have to have further discussion. But I think we can dispense of that very easily that way. Are we okay with that? Barbara, you're the instigator, Barbara.
The troublemaker, Commissioner. Yes, I'm okay with that. And I think it just makes good sense to extinguish that right of way, as we discussed, when the purpose is no longer valid for a cell tower.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you brought that up, Barbara. Barbara, would you like to make that motion? I could have Jason read it to the record and you can say.
I need my paper back.
Can I just make the motion subject to Jason's language?
Yes, that is perfect. And now Jason, read the language.
So the motion is to authorize the grant of a right-of-way across the wall of Atoga's mountain property as proposed, subject to the inclusion of a sunset provision to be reviewed by the LMF board, providing for the right-of-way to be extinguished if a communications tower is no longer operated on the property.
Excellent. We have seconded by Roger. Is there any questions to the motion? Is there any objections? Seeing no objection either in the room or online, the motion passes. Great. Thank you very much, Jason. Now we are back to our regularly scheduled agenda item, which is the next CNR.
That's right, next focus. And so this is the money slide. There are two slides. There's the money slide and there's the consideration of eco regions as a way of thinking about your next round. All options are on the table for you all, obviously. You remember that $1.691 million available. And we also have 1.4 million in interest, and a conversation that has been happening sort of back and forth a bit hey, we have that 1.4 million. And if you were to grab all of that 1.4 million and put it all into CNR, you would have just under $3 million after removing set-asides for that. However, if you were to, I calculated roughly that the 1.4 million, 74% of that is attributable to CNR funding, not 75, because this is sitting alongside other funding like our unrestricted gifts and our restricted gifts. So I did the math and it's 74% of 1.4 million would be 1,036,000. If you move the set asides, that gives you 900,870 to deal, and you'd have available funds for your next round of just under 2.6 million. And then just for comparison down below, this is just an FYI. So I think that I don't know what your pleasure is actually, whether you want to talk about how you want to think about funding, or if you want to talk about first how you might want to narrow your focus or how you might want to shift your focus. I don't know what the board would like to do with this
Okay,
conversation.
I've got Barbara's hand up. We'll start with Barbara and then we'll come back to the board. Barbara?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I think it's important to have another round of CNR for a couple of reasons. One, there are projects out there waiting for funding, and that's our goal, is to help those projects go to fruition. And two, the legislature and the governor's office potentially will be discussing another allocation of funds to LMF, and I think it's important for them to see us utilizing existing funds as we have been directed. The question I would raise, Laura, is it's 1.4 million now,
Yeah.
but as we know, we're collecting, I think it was indicated 4% or so. So the monies that are in there are continuing to collect money, and I would anticipate that by the time we would need these monies, it would be well in excess of $2 million that might be interest accrued in that fund. So we actually have more flexibility than taking it right now, because these monies probably wouldn't even be allocated until next May if we issued a call and followed the sort of historical, outline of how we make the call and get the proposals in and then do our judging. So we would have significantly more months to collect interest, correct?
Yes, and we're going to start drawing down money pretty fast. So I don't know if but the concept is absolutely solid, that yes, that's why I divvied up the 1.69 is for sure, right? And then there's the interest earned. And really, if you guys wanted to think about, again, back to, do you want to think about 74% of the interest that's earned with set asides, or do you want to think about some other number? However you want to think about that. But you're absolutely right. There will be more. How much more is TBD? Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying, Barbara, and I respect that, but I'm just wondering about, are you counting chickens before they hatch? The funding, the interest 4% can change. I'm just wondering if you can go out and initiate a call for proposals on money that, an amount that you haven't earned yet. While I completely understand, and I agree, we want to spend what we have and the interest that we have, because if you don't spend it, then what's the need to go justification for making another call? But I'm just worried about saying we're going to spend this when we don't actually have it in hand.
And Catherine, what I would suggest is that we actually can go back into this fund and take more money. In other words, if we issue a call for proposals and $3 million of proposals come in and we think they're all worthy, we can go see if we have that interest at that time and then reallocate it to our projects.
Yeah, we can be conservative in estimating how much money we'll have available. And frankly, if we had $2 million worth of projects and we only had 1.7, we could say, oh, look, we've got some more money. We can fund this. So the board has total flexibility here.
Right. That's what I think. We should just realize that we potentially do have that flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any possibility that we might be misleading people with projects if in fact we don't commit to something, or depending on which way we go, that they say, okay, there's more money, we'll go ahead and do it, versus looks like they're really cutting back on us, we'll hold off. Has that ever been a consideration?
I mean, I'm sure there are thoughts. There could also be the opposite, like, uh-oh, they're running out of money, better go now. You know, I'm not the expert on how people, but.
It was just more in terms of the timing to commit. Is that going to influence? And maybe, we don't know, maybe not.
I don't know.
I didn't read the tea leaves, really. I think we just give a best estimate. If we're off a little bit, we can adjust.
Agreed, agreed. I do want to ask staff from a staff capacity standpoint. This is basically going to be a mini round, but a mini round, it takes as much staff resources as a full round sometimes. So I'm just would like to know from staff, if like you're in a place where launching on this next round later this fall with the work that you have ongoing with the projects that are closing is,
Right, and that's a serious question, which is gonna step all over one of my staff updates. I was gonna leave it for last, so as not to cast a pall over this whole thing. Erica is, we have loved working with Erica. I could have cried, but maybe I did a little bit. Erica is going back to Forest Society of Maine. She'll continue to be our partner in the world. Erica, do you want to say a little bit about what you're moving into?
Sure. Yeah, I took the conservation project manager position with the Forest Society. Kristen Pete, who was in that position, moved to Appalachian Mountain Club, so work with Steve Tacko, and I'm sure we're all really happy for her. So I wasn't necessarily looking to change jobs, and I don't want this to be, seen as any kind of a negative against the LMF program or the staff, because it's been a wonderful opportunity to be here. I wouldn't have considered shifting jobs if it wasn't a place I had worked 12 and a half years previously.
Thank you. And all of you say, of all the times for you to ask me, how's it feeling staff capacity wise? This is very fun. But having said that, I think we've all been assuming that this is what we're going to do. It's not like it's been, so we're thinking that there was not time between now and November, which is our typical launch for a new workbook, to make a lot of changes. And there's not a lot of staff capacity to foster the kind of communications that would make a lot of changes. But we certainly understand how and why the money flows. And we are, your staff is committed. We are committed. We should be committed.
Exactly. It's at the tip of my tongue, but it came better.
Yeah.
Okay, so, that is good to hear. I certainly don't mind, pushing an overloaded staff a little bit, so.
We snap.
There's a couple people in the room that would probably echo that agreement. One thing that I would just recognize is not a lot of time, as you said, to make work for it. It falls back to conversations that we've had with you, but more broadly too, about prioritization and spending money in focused areas. We wouldn't have time to do that for the small amount.
Well, maybe, I did create another slide.
You did?
I did, just over, what is that?
Overachieving.
I'm trying to, yeah, exactly.
Commissioner, before we leave this slide, I just have a question. When we announce a call, do we have to announce specifically how much money we have for that call?
We
could always say that, board anticipates approximately $3 million in funding or approximately $2.5 billion,
But generally, we do put a number there. Is that correct?
Honestly, I can't remember, but however, remember, we take that money, those appropriated funds, and we bin them out. So people that are paying attention know usually how much money we have available in CNR and working waterfront.
Okay, thank you.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, and we haven't made this exactly. And so this was to capture what Mac has been discussing. And I think depending on how you all come out, that wouldn't be too hard to tweak for a workbook necessarily.
So we could have a focus on ecoregions.
Yeah.
Looking at that.
And what would the focus be? We're gonna pick a couple ecoregions that we're gonna try and work in these 2 or 3, or?
I think Mac, you have some thoughts here.
What's your?
Yeah, so this goes back to an issue I raised. I think it was at the June meeting last year that looking at Let me say that this is showing the allocation of the entire LMF program over its entire history. The table on the right, number of projects and acres by county. And the ecoregions are portrayed with the colors there in the background, but the data are not available to look at how our allocations have been by ecoregions. It could be done. It would be a day or two's work to generate that kind of information. But I think the point I was making then is that in our recent rounds, 10, 11, and 12, it was apparent to me there were big parts of the state that were not being, we weren't getting proposals from them. It's not that we were systematically working against, we just weren't getting the proposals for basically all of northern Maine, University County. I'm now, and sorry, I need to back up and say, I'm thinking now about the proposals coming in from land trusts and municipalities for the state and regional, the local and regional importance projects, not the IFNW BPL. Obviously had some statewide significant projects that were well distributed around this state, but the smaller scale projects were not coming in. The proposals weren't coming in for, geographically speaking, more than half the state wasn't being represented at all. We had no proposal from University County, Knobscott County. I don't think we had any from some Piscataquis, one from Somerset, none from Washington County. So one possibility that occurred to me was trying to design the next round in a way that would right that imbalance in some fashion. I remember discussing it with Barbara. She came up with the idea of perhaps having a round where one says we are entertaining proposals from counties where there have been no proposals, or I'm not sure what the number is, 0, maybe 1, maybe 2, when we want to do a little analysis, but some sort of low threshold like that from a given county. We would only accept proposals from those counties that meet that criterion. That's.
Yeah, one of the things we could take into account, we would prioritize those areas, right? And so, two, for the word I'm looking for, but if we're not inclusive enough, right? We're gonna end up in a situation where
We might.
just because of the land trust footprint in those areas is small.
Yeah, over time, 10 years, it seems that, whether it's resources, staff, and whatever in these locations and sheer population doesn't allow for an increased participation in LMF. And I think in some of our back and forth discussions, we'd say, well, gee, it's too bad that given that circumstance that LMF overworked staff. If some of the funds that are generated for LMF were dedicated for greater staff capacity to help some of these locations that don't have funds. I mean, we had the potential for having highly qualified staff, whether it's, 4 or 8, to fill that void. I'm convinced that that's one of the real drawbacks, that even if we tried to decide to focus it there, that there's still going to be some staffing and technical expertise shortfalls. Yeah. It may be a pipe dream on my part, but it seems like
what the budget looks like going into this next biennial with its pipe dream, but I'll just leave it at that.
But I totally agree, Jim, that the big problem lies in the capacity out there to generate the proposals probably. And discussing this with others here in the room and Barbara. There are some further thoughts. One thing that might lower the barrier would be, and I don't know if our enabling legislation allows us to do this, but the 50% match. What if we could we legally make it a different match, only require 20% match? There may be folks out there that just don't have the 50% to pull off a project. That's one possibility. You mentioned the idea of enabling LMF staff to help. But there are people, one of them sitting in this room, Jerry, who have a history of helping local land trusts. The Francis Small Heritage Trust that we just did. The legwork that happened behind that was done not by LMF staff, nor by the people in Porter so much as somebody like Barry. I don't know what would be involved in trying to enable that process.
Billboard. The end of 95 with Jerry's face.
That's what I need. But there are people up in.
Yeah.
I'll focus on Aroostook County just sort of as representative of something that's really larger than Aroostook County. And amazingly, Penobscot County has only 2 local really active land trusts, and they're down at the southern end of the county. They don't operate in most of Penobscot County, but anyway, there are first of all, there are municipalities up there who have local recreation needs. They have public water supply issues and such that could come to the fore. There's people, I happen to have had some interaction with people, the select board and a bunch of landowners in Perham, tiny little town, but they would love to do more conservation in their town, in the areas surrounding an existing BPL reserve where there are lots of rare plants.
Yeah. Barbara?
Thank you, Commissioner. I wish I were there. I think this is a longer discussion that we can have, maybe not in this board meeting. I think we have done some good things. I recall that we worked through Laura's fantastic flow charts and everything to make mitigation funds available, because the Land Trust in Orono, which is all volunteer based, had requested that. And I think we're doing a better job, helping municipalities come forward and present projects. In terms of this next round, I'm just going to focus on this next round. Making all the entities aware of the opportunity, that's the best we can do at this point. When we see the projects before us, whatever comes in, I think we have another opportunity to consider priorities based on what comes in. But I think that's the time to discuss priorities in the context of this call, rather than, you set too many priorities. Right now, we might not have any projects that would come in that we could assist with. The other thing I would mention is that it may not be that LMF is the right entity to work with these local land trusts and municipalities. We need to keep in mind that Maine Coast Heritage Trust has a specific person, Angela Twitchell, who used to lead the Brunswick Topsom Land Trust, whose job is to work with land trusts all across the state. So there are statewide entities that work on this and help these land trusts come up with proposals and deal with these issues. So I would just turn us back at this point to our opportunity to put out a call for the remaining funds that we have and see what comes in. And then if, depending on what comes in, if we feel we want to overlay some additional priorities at that time, based on some of the discussion items, I think we could do that.
I'm gonna, I know Judy had a comment, and I think Mac was about ready to raise his hand. I would just caution about that only because we have a scoring system, and if we have projects that score high and then come back and say, well, we're gonna reprioritize and focus on Rooster County, that opens us up for a lot of criticism. I think we do need to be very transparent that if we are going to ask for or give priority to other areas, that we're very upfront about that, and we should talk about how that would be reflected potentially in the workflow. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Judy and then Mac, and then I'm gonna bring this baby home.
Thanks, Chair. I was just gonna add that I think my memory is correct. Our applications to the MNRCP project have been similar,
Yeah.
that there have been much fewer applicants for that funding mechanism in those, Aroostook County in particular. And from our perspective in wanting to work on some larger scale projects, those, and so I guess I'm hesitant to direct LMF staff to already overworked staff to kind of take on that role, that, those are relationships that takes years to develop to get folks interested in those conservation projects. And I sort of agree with Barbara that there are other entities that might be better suited to help in those, Aroostook County, or help with towns or the municipalities in those areas to help them try and access these funds or work toward conservation in their area. But I do think folks need to be, if we're going to put priorities or any preference, we need to do that in the announcements so that, people from Southern Maine don't put all their time and effort into an application process where there's already limited funds, and then suddenly we overlay a preference for a work capital. So I think we just need to be clear with our call for proposals on what exactly we're focused on this round, given the limited funding.
Yeah, I've got Mac and then I've got Molly on the screen.
Yeah, I understand Barbara's concern that there's not a lot of time to do some complicated things if we're going to have a next round in a reasonable time frame. But if we don't do something different, we're not going to have the proposals to choose from. They're not going to come through unless we do something. Could anyone answer my question about the match? Is that fixed? The 50% match?
A thought, which is dangerous for me to just have a thought and share it right away. Here we go. No, you can't change the 50% match. However, where 50% match is not an issue is if you have a pre-acquisition. If there's a lot of land, I think of municipalities particularly, who have pre-acquired that could use funding to keep it protected forever. The match takes care of itself in the appraisal, because we're only going to fund half of the appraised value. Boom, match, right? The tricky part in there is we also have a 2-year limit on what we look at. And that is a bigger policy discussion too, whether that's really a good idea or not, but there's stuff to talk about in a longer time frame than we have for this next workbook. But I wonder if these are conversations that should move forward after we settle what we're gonna do with this next workbook, and then we have these conversations that move forward, so that there's not the sense of, because otherwise, yeah, we're always saying, gee, wouldn't it be nice? But
And the time, we haven't really got the timing yet of the next workbook.
no.
Before you, just in general though, because I want to go to Molly. Are you thinking November?
Yes.
Okay. Molly.
Hi, so I serve on the MNRCP Review Committee and Outdoor Heritage Fund, and it's so discouraging to see just not enough competition. There's more money than there are projects right now. I don't think it's the time to do anything with LMF per se about trying to reallocate across all the different regions. I do know MNRCP has an interesting way of how they deal with it as mitigation projects. And so they actually have a proportion based on where the mitigation is taking place as to how the funds are supposed to be spent across the regions. But after 2 or 3 years, the funds can then go into a statewide pot. So if at some point, and this is looking into the future, if the LMF board wanted to be thinking, we want to guarantee that at least 5%, across the 7 jurisdictions, 35% is allocated regionally. You could do that with a backup of then going back to a statewide pot of money. But at this point, given the governor's goal within the climate action plan to increase the pace of conservation, I wouldn't be putting any restrictions on funds in terms of trying to get the money as quickly as possible out the door. I think if it was distributed by region, you may find funds even more so going unspent. So anyways, it's something that maybe Laura can look into in terms of the language that's part of the instrument that's out there with regard to MNRCP about that proportional kind of regional approach. That's my thought.
Roger, and then Jim.
Yeah, to support Barbara's and what Judy also said, that a couple of years ago, we went through quite a process, a charrette process of responding to our partners. And it was a bunch of heavy lifting. And now maybe we have a partner in Maine Coast Heritage Trust or someone else who can help us get past this gap here. So kind of farming it out and hoping that that will be more productive and certainly be able to accomplish what we might not be able to accomplish ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, not to disparage the eco-region concept of priorities, but over time, it appears to me that, there could have been some other priorities in terms of size of projects, that if you ask somebody like Jerry, what are some of the, how big an operation do you have to be able to keep the ball rolling to get a project? And there's all kinds of small, real small, that can't get that ball. So that might be another priority that we looked at is some small projects that can't generate money and interest and so forth. That's necessary to pull it all together.
Something that Molly said struck a chord with me about the, concordance with the governor's goal for increasing land allocation in the 30 by 30 context. What if we were to not worry so much about what county or even ecoregion proposals were coming from, but worry about the price per acre that we're paying, and say that in this final round, we want proposals that are take some cap, where it's going to cost us less than $2,000 per acre. So that those $3 million, if that's what we have, will pay for a whole lot more acres than if we're getting proposals from the southwestern corner of the state where land is so expensive. But
Yeah, I
it's
think you
also
still have your great pressure. Okay, I want to make sure we move along here, but, and I think you've got another slide on timing here.
I don't actually. I'm assuming I'm November with the, just like this past year,
When is the next board meeting?
November 19th.
November 19th is the next board meeting.
It is the next board meeting. Yeah.
Commissioner, I have my hand up. May I just make a comment?
Please, Barbara. Please make a comment.
Just one.
So I just wanted to say that I certainly am not suggesting that we change the rules of the game after the projects come in. But what I was trying to suggest is that we have a lot of discretion in our scoring to score things based on need and various other things, as we know. And I would just give as an example of that, I'm looking at Androscoggin now in this chart. And Androscoggin, we could argue, is one of the underserved areas, both in terms of the number of projects and also in the acres. But then I would commend the board because I think we've made a particular effort to fund projects such as Camp Guston, and then we just funded another project. And the Androscoggin Land Trust is very new to this process. They are one of the newer smaller land trusts with very little capacity who have come forward, and I think we've worked really well with them. So again, I would just hope that we could go forward with this proposal, that we could use our discretion in the scoring as appropriate, and that some of these issues we would have a continuing discussion on as we move forward.
I guess just another thought or proposal would be to where the first time I think we got the allocation of $40 million from the legislature, we did a quick statewide significance projects. And those projects are typically big with a big price tag. So what if we did the opposite and focused on the smaller community, local, regional projects, which typically have smaller price tag, but still have a lot of impact to the towns and the municipalities in which they occur.
One thought, I think we may end up, because of municipalities that have more capacity, I think it's always gonna come back to a capacity issue.
Right. Yeah.
But that's certainly.
I don't think we're going to solve the Westchester County
Yeah.
problem before November.
Yeah, I don't, and, you know, Molly brought up the climate council thing. I think, and the governor's goal, I think if the governor knew how many projects were actually funded in some of these areas, she'd be like, try to fix that as part of this goal.
Right.
Right? I mean, don't you agree?
Right.
I mean, so I think that this is one, it's been a very good discussion. Two, I don't think we potentially have time to solve it. And this is a small round, but this highlights the fact for me that this board needs to solve this problem. And so I just want to challenge us all thinking beyond this next round as we're thinking about it going into the new year, that we put some time set aside on the agenda, ask for our partners to come in and participate with us and to think about how we want to move forward to kind of solve some of these problems around the focus of these ecoregions. We can maybe brainstorm on some capacity issues. So, and the billboard for Jerry. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of limiting, I'm with Molly, really. When we looked at what we would need to be spending to protect the amount of land that gets us to that goal of 2030, we need to be, ramping up by 5 times what we're doing every year. So anything that would maybe, restrict our ability to spend funds, I would just caution against. I would just suggest that, if we wanted to talk more about this at some point in time, it does seem really clear that there are certain counties that have had more success than others. And I think that we could simply, insert a scoring,
Yes.
element that just gives more points to counties with less than X number of projects under their belt. But in terms of, and also looking at, prioritizing smaller dollar or, less expensive acreage, I think we're going to get a mix. And I think as a board, we can just work through what we get. And I wouldn't layer too many guardrails right now on how we make our decisions.
But I raised my hand earlier to disagree with my very good friend Barbara, whom I know for decades. I don't think we have a lot of discretion in our scoring. The scoring, and it's one of the great features of it is that the scoring is so well laid out that it is what it is. And we can't simply, unless we do it explicitly, which you just sort of proposed, and I don't know if we have the flexibility to say, we're going to give 20 points for every county, any proposal for an eco region or a county that's been underrepresented in the last 3 years. If we can do that, then that would be good, and it'd be good to put that out there, that that is going to happen, and it might encourage people who've been sitting on the sidelines to come forward. If we have that discretion, that's great, but we certainly don't have it under the current scoring
So
system.
do we have the discretion to say, like we do with the deer yards, that we get an extra, an extra 10% or, extra credit points will be allocated to projects and we would have to define what those 4 or whatever, 3, 4, 5 underrepresented.
But that's statutorily though, the deer thing.
That is statute. Yeah.
Right, but I mean,
But
could
here-
we add on a different one,
But
right? So we're ready to give another 20 points or
I think
whatever.
Commissioner Beal's thoughts around from a county, if you look at it from a you could do a very simple scoring change, because you're right, Max. I think that the flexibility is not there, right? It's very simple scoring change could be looking at this CNR projects by county and just simply saying, who are the underserved ones here? And projects from these counties would get 5 points or 10 points, whatever, and so it is a points component and it touches on it. Maybe that's step one in this process.
Yep.
So if everybody, we're all, what we have, staff is gonna bring this back to us in November. So staff could go back, we could just ask staff, go back, think about this, see if there's any, if they have thoughts, and then they could bring that as part of the proposal with the package in November.
Indeed.
I hate to make this more complicated. I know you're sort of running out of time here, but there is an important distinction to be made, but in terms of timeframes. If you look at Piscataquis County on this figure, 279,000, almost half of the acreage is in one county. When you look over the entire lifespan of LMF, if you look over the LMF over the last 3 years, I'm not sure we've had a single proposal from Piscataquis County. So your time frame has to be thought about very carefully here. I personally kind of think that they're both important. What have we done recently? What have we done over the decades?
I would just offer one more comment, Mac, about our scoring. I think sometimes we have more latitude than we really take advantage of. And I think of the legislature's recent mandate to us to give more points when a project is near an underserved area. And one of my frustrations has been that, everyone seems to think they're a service area. So I think looking at our scoring more carefully is an ongoing process that we need to do, and to give ourselves more latitude within our scoring as we move forward. Again, not something we can do today, but I think going forward, we have some opportunities to improve our scoring.
I think this has been a very good conversation. Staff certainly is absorbing it like a sponge. And that we will see some revision at our November meeting with the workbook. And I would challenge the staff, based on what they've heard, maybe think about bringing something back to us for consideration, and whether we'll include it or not. We can make that decision at that time. So with that, we will move on to staff updates.
Yes, okay, and we've stepped on the lead a little bit, the biggest step, anyway. Rules update briefly, my adoption package is almost completely out the door. I'm so excited to have this up. I can't wait till this is done. And legislative changes, the administration is releasing legislation to clean up LMF statute and to provide some flexibility for option to purchase at agricultural value, which would mirror the working waterfront covenant option, which would be a really big deal. And Erica. So for the little period of time you have been with us, Erica, you have been you've made a huge impact, and you've been a tremendous asset. And I look forward to being your partner as we go. Yeah.
Don't cry
a little bit.
One question.
Jude.
I think the last legislative session, Amanda brought forward the opportunity for commissioners to send delegates. Did that pass?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And you can have a proxy.
Yes. you still have to come.
Well, I'm just making sure. I remember when I was in the doctor's office and I got a call saying, can you step out and jump on the call? I'm like, yeah.
Oh, I should bring the calendar for the next year to you guys next time too, shouldn't I? That would be
Yes,
a
yeah,
good thing.
that would be, okay. Any upcoming meetings are here, AOC, at the AOC, there was obviously the November 19 meeting. I will be back from North Woods by then, so I will be here. Anything else be brought to the attention of the board?
I move we adjourn.
We got a motion to adjourn. I think I just heard everybody second you. That was a good discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.